And welcome back. I decided to shoot this as a separate video and kind of show at least the part numbers that we're using on this build so far in case someone's looking for a similar part. Maybe this will help save you some time searching for what those part numbers are. So as you can see here, this is the myriad of parts that have come in so far to at least hopefully get our engine back up and running again. And some of these parts we're changing out, not because we condemn them 100%. It's because, again, when this goes to its new home, we want it to be as trouble-free as possible. So we're taking advantage of the opportunity, since we have access to some of these components, to go ahead and just change them out with new ones. And that way we know that that component for at least a set period of decent amount of time will be trouble-free. So when we were talking about the cylinder head in the previous videos, I made a comment that I didn't like the way some of those valves looked. And to show them to you, these are the valves that we took out of both the cylinder heads, as you saw in the previous videos. The cylinders 1 through 8, one at the bottom going to 8 through the top. These are your intake valves here on the left and your exhaust valves here on the right. And you see that some of these look like they could very well easily be cleaned up and just reused. But then you see others, such as this one, which looks kind of crusty and burnt. This one here, that one up there. So with that being said, and especially with the number 7 intake being bent like we showed in the previous video, we just went ahead and opted to just replace all of the intake and exhaust valves in both these heads. Yeah, it was a little bit of unneeded expense to go ahead and do it, but again, since we had to replace one, let's just go ahead and replace all of them. That way, you know, we know we're not dealing with valves that may be in questionable shape. Now, if you're tearing your heads down for another reason and you didn't have any bent valves, maybe it was just a broken timing guide or something happened with timing, or you're just doing lifters and cam, if your valves are in decent shape, then by all means, that one's a good one there. Looks fairly decent, a little bit of cleaning, and that would come out fine and be perfectly reusable. So again, it's just a judgment call that you need to make when you're tearing your stuff down as to what you want to do when you do the reassembly. But getting back to our parts here, this is a Mopar OEM intake valve. I'm sorry, not intake, exhaust. This is the exhaust valve. And this was the part number listed for it per the My Mopar Parts website. So we got 8 of these to go in. These are our intake valves. Bigger valves are intake. Once again, there's let's see if we can get a straight up on that one. There we go. That's the part number for the intake valve. Again, as listed for a 5.7 off the My Mopar Parts website. I couldn't get the Mopar valve stem seals, so I just went aftermarket with this one, which I've used their products before aftermarket and been fine with it. So these are the valve stem seals. The nice thing is, when you order this particular pack, you get all 16. Versus the way I've seen Mopar handle it. It's not really a dig on them, but I have seen some websites that sell the valve stem seals, an OEM valve stem seal at a quantity of 1 per seal, versus the aftermarket where you tend to get all 16 that you need in one bag. It's a bit nicer in my opinion. We've got our OEM push rods, both intake and exhaust. So right there, that is your exhaust push rod part number. And these should be your 8 intake push rods. Hopefully that focuses in. Perfect. So we got our new valves, our new valve stem seals, and our new push rods to put into our cylinder head. We're going to jump over the timing next. If you remember, when we took the timing components apart, I made a comment about the guide that was in there was an older revision of a guide in which the back of it was plastic, which had a tendency of breaking. And You can see that the newer guide, the back of it is made out of metal. It just has this nylon plastic type insert that the chain rides on top of now. That is the part number for that. So that's your timing chain guide. This should be your timing chain tensioner. Yep, and it is. That's your timing chain tensioner. And this is the timing chain itself. So it looks like it's a 53022316AC. And this is the lower crank timing sprocket. Again, we're changing this part out and all of these timing components out. One, because we're in there, we've got easy access to it. No better time to do it since we have the timing cover removed and we're changing out that oil pump than to go ahead and do all this while you're in there. Save yourself some headache from potentially having to do it again later. So just to recap that one, that was your guide, your tensioner, your lower crank sprocket, and then the actual timing chain itself. And then we'll, of course, when we get to doing all this on the engine, we'll absolutely shoot some video of this and show you how we're putting the engine back in time and the whole 9 yards that come along with that. On the Hemis, thankfully, it's not too terrible. Now, this is the part that I preemptively purchased. I accidentally forgot to remove it from the cart. You can see that part number there. What this is the Vvt Actuator Solenoid. So this is what's in charge of diverting the oil flow to the cam phaser to allow it to change the duration of the cam itself. So you change the duration of the cam or the specs on the cam, and you affect, how your valves, your intake and exhaust valves actuate. This is the phaser to cam bolt, which per instruction, whenever you crack this loose, it has to be replaced. They do not want you to reuse this bolt. This package right here, which the two seals are actually sitting on top of that package because they had this all taped together, holding it together. You can see that part number there. This is what they list as the replacement O-ring or replacement gasket that goes on the oil pickup tube to the oil pump. Again, when you crack that tube loose from that pump, they strongly state that, actually don't strongly state, but they do state that they want that seal replaced. Again, this is responsible for your oil pressure. If something happens to this O-ring while you're putting that pickup tube back in that pump and you go to start your vehicle, you could very easily have no oil pressure, because if this seal is not in place, then there's not a good enough seal for the pump to do its job and pick the oil up out of the sump. This bolt that you see here is one of many that hold the timing cover in. This is one of the, or two of the longer ones. And the reason why I got that, let me show you that part number there. You may not need this one at all, but I'll show you the reason why. I went ahead and picked some new bolts up for that one once I can find what happened to the cover. There it is. Let's get this cover out of here and just set them off to the side. One of these bolts we pulled out, which is this one right here, is a little worse for wear. You can just see the amount of corrosion on that particular bolt. So it definitely got a hold of dirt, grime, some kind of water that got in that channel with it, and just all kinds of corrosion came out of it when we took the bolt out of it. And of course you can see the shape that it's in. So that is actually that bolt right there, and that's the location that it's in. It's so for instance, your water neck, like if the water pump was installed, you'd have one of the radiator hookups, the upper radiator hookup, the lower radiator hookup. And I believe it's here and here on both sides of that lower radiator hookup. is where those longer bolts go through. So again, you can see them here. It's like I'm listed as 7 and 8. And this one isn't too bad, but it's kind of the same, just a lot of corrosion on it. So rather than just reuse these crusty type bolts, which if you had a wire wheel, you can wire wheel those and clean those up and by chance reuse them. But since I was buying a bunch of hardware for this truck anyway, and that's why we purchased those two, just to go ahead and change them out. Let's get back to our parts table. Let's see. So, exhaust. I'm sorry. Let's get. Yeah, so you saw those bolts. You saw these oil seals. These are part of the exhaust hardware to bolt the exhaust manifolds back onto the cylinder heads. You can see that part number there. This is what they call a stud, because it is a bolt with that little bit of stud on top, and what that is there to do is to bolt on the heat shield. Speaking of heat shields, that's the part number for the heat shields on a 5.7. It should be coming through. And this is actually left or right. It's the same part number for either side. So what that stud does is it bolts and it sticks through on those two areas there and those two fasteners there, and just bolts this to the top of those studs. And of course you can see this is the one that was on the passenger side that was still there. The one on the driver's side was missing, which is why we got the replacement. But you can see that we got a little bit of work there, because that was two of our studs that we extracted in the previous video. We just got to get this nut off the top there and pull that the rest of the way out. Now the remaining bolts that bolt on the exhaust, at least for a 5.7, are right there. You can see that these bolts, just like these studs, all have a, hard to see in this one, but they all have a little bit of Loctite already on them. I believe that is Loctite, some form of Loctite, or maybe anti-seize, but it's already pre-treated kind of there on the end of those threads. But that's the remaining bolt that bolts the exhaust manifolds again onto the heads. Let's get a picture of that one. So that is 6507746AA. And I'll see if I can get all of the OEM part numbers typed up and put them in the description as far as to what they went to. But you got to kind of take that list with a grain of salt, because Mopar, when they revise an item, from what I can understand of their part numbers, like for instance this one ends in AC, what I've seen them do is, like, the first revision of a part will normally be AA, and then if they revise the part it becomes AB, AC, AD, and so on and so forth. So when you're looking at a parts list, especially if it's like one maybe I might put in a description, that part number might change, you know, in 6 months to a year or longer, you know, if they revise a certain piece. Now this is one of the aftermarket parts we picked up, because some of these parts, trying to get them either through OEM is either A, unobtainium, or B, just ludicrously expensive. So in those two cases, I will go out and get an aftermarket part for it. And Gates, I've used Gates, you know, Radiator products for years and been happy with them. So this is the coolant outlet. A little bit of a bad camera angle while I open this box, but that's just a new outlet that bolts onto the water pump, and that is for the upper radiator hose. Again, the one we took off was kind of crusty and rusty. You know, this is fairly inexpensive to replace it. Might as well put a new one on it while we're there. And of course, you know, can't put a new water pump on without going ahead and just putting on a new thermostat. Now there were several different types of thermostats listed for a 5.7, and I actually had to compare this to the factory one, and it came down to temperature. I'm trying to see if they wrote the temperature on this Gates one. Yeah, I don't necessarily see the degree number, but what I had to do was look at the OEM one I took out, and the OEM one on the underside of it here had it stamped what the temperature range was, and then I was able to use that temperature range to match it up to this Gates thermostat you see here. I want to say it was the factory one's like 230, I think 230 or 250 degrees, somewhere around in there. That's why, at least on the thermostat, you definitely want to check and make sure that you're getting the right range to put back in there. Down here underneath the table, again, we got various gasket sets, because a lot of these gasket sets we could not get Mopar on them. They were just unobtainium with no date as to when they might come in. Again, I chose Felpro, and you can see Mall in there again. I think that's how you say it, is Mall. I'm probably butchering that, but I have no problem with Felpro either. This is what you can see is the valve cover gasket set. So they'll give you the valve cover and the spark plug tubes come in this kit. So everything that you need to reseal the valve cover is that part number there. Again, that's Felpro. This is for the timing cover. Don't ask me why they put this in such a large package. The only thing I can figure is that this must have been for like a mall head gasket, and I guess they just didn't have a smaller backing to put that timing cover seal in. But you know, either way, that's the timing cover seal, and it doesn't. Well, there we go. There's a part number. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So perfect. So that's to seal our front timing cover. There's another seal that hasn't come in for the front timing cover, which is the one that goes around the crank pulley. And there's a couple other parts that were a couple other bolts and miscellaneous hardware that we're waiting for to come in. Of course, you know, I'll shoot another video when those parts do come in. This is another Felpro gasket set, as you can see here, and this one covers the exhaust manifolds. You get both left and right hand sides inside that kit. Again, trying to get the OEM one, was just unobtainium. Gates water pump, as you can see there, and along with the water pump, new upper and lower radiator hoses. This is the lower radiator hose, also Gates. And of course you can see there the upper radiator hose, also Gates. Again, the thought behind it was, since I had to go aftermarket for one part of the cooling system, and we wanted to change the upper lower radiator hose, the heater core hoses, and everything out to get rid of any trace of contamination, plus the hoses themselves. Like I said when we were taking it apart in the video, you can tell they were kind of mushy and kind of getting towards the end of their life. So since we went Gates with the water pump, everything else, since it was available, also went Gates. I'll do a follow-up on it, but what you don't see here, because it was on back order until recently, which were the heater core hoses, which are coming in, which will also be Gates. Head gaskets, both left and right hand side, and I'll show you both of these part numbers. So you can see there, this is the left hand head gasket, this is the right hand head gasket, again 5.7 liter, also Felpro. Like I said, just with the part shortages in general, just getting a hold of a lot of this stuff, you kind of have to go with what you can get a hold of. This is the oil pan slash what Chrysler also calls windage tray gasket. And then this one was actually kind of nice, because you'll see there's multiple items listed there, which was kind of cool. What they give you in this kit is not only the oil pan gasket, but you can kind of see it down there in the bottom of the box. They actually give you an O-ring for the pickup tube for the oil pump, as well as a small little tube of RTV sealant. And what that's for, I can show you on the replacement oil pan. You see these areas here? It kind of looks like you have a little tip running into two areas and a little checkered pattern on all these two corners here on this end. and these two corners here in this end, what this is, these line up with the rear main seal cover and then the front timing cover. And because it's one metal surface bolting up against another metal surface, you have a gap there. And per the instructions, when you put this new tray on, you're supposed to put a bead of RTV on across that seam where those two things meet, just to keep anything from necessarily trailing out. So that's why they give you a little tube of RTV sealant in with this kit, is to take care of that, which is actually, you know, pretty cool of them. And I'll obviously show you all that when we go to install that oil pan gasket. I'll show you what I mean about those mating surfaces. It was the exact same process on the 6.4, where we had to RTV those 4 spots before putting that new gasket in place. Now, one item I didn't show you, just got to push it out, and this is the cam, the replacement cam. This is just a standard factory Mopar cam. Let me rotate this so it's just not upside down on you. But that's the part number. And there actually is a core charge on this OEM cam. It's a $100 core charge. So you definitely want to make sure that, you know, if you want your $100 back, obviously, you know, package up the damaged one and, you know, ship it back to Mopar. I thought about reaching out to Comp Cams or one of the other aftermarket and performance cam individuals to see if I could get just a replacement stock. But I thought about it, and I looked at the website, and the cost for a Comp Cams one or another type cam or Texas Speed or many other ones was roughly about the same price as this stock one was from Rock Auto. So I figured, you know what, let's just leave it as stock as we can get it, again, to cut down on any potential problems that somebody may run into, especially if somebody else has a tear into this engine and they, you know, see a cam in there that isn't factory. Now, don't get me wrong, if I was building a performance motor or wanting to do custom tunes, things of that nature, then I would absolutely get a third-party cam in there and upgrade from stock. But in this application, we don't need to do that. The only part that we haven't covered that has come in thus far, and now I need to find it. This is the myriad of destruction you see here from disassembling that 5.7. I see it right there. I'll give you a shot of my aloe plants. Have found their way and called the garage their home. So they don't like being outside in the summer heat that we're starting to get. I have to forgive the camera angle when I get this box out of here. Okay. So this one I'm going to show you the part number on is one of the upgrades we're actually going to do to this, but we're going to stick with an OEM part when we do it. So that's what I was referring to earlier. That is the part number there. And this is a Hellcat, or what is referred to as a Hellcat Oil Pump. This is actually the part number I would need if I were to order a replacement oil pump for that vehicle. So that's actually how I ordered this one. I just look them up based on our 2019 Hellcat that you see there and order appropriately. And that part number, as I understand it, will fit any Hemi engine that is a 2009 or newer. If you have a 2008 or earlier, that pump will not work for your application. But there is a third-party company called Melling that puts out a very similar high-volume, higher PSI pump, just as like the Hellcat pump is, that can be used on a 2008 or newer Hemi. I believe they also make one for 2009 and older, but don't quote me on that. I know for a fact they do make one for 2008 and newer. If you have a 2009 or later, which this just happens to be a 2009 we're working on, as you know, that pump will fit. So this is the same upgrade that we did to our 6.4, in which we took the stock pump out and put in a Hellcat pump. Now we're doing this for a couple of reasons. One, to give us the extra lubrication benefits, to help protect all these lovely new parts that we're getting ready to put in, and two, to help guard against what's also known as the Hemi tick, meaning if you get the type of tick in which we had in this one, as we discovered, which was massive amounts of lifter failure, which then destroyed the camshaft in the process. The theory is that one of the reasons why the lifters may fail in a Hemi is if you have a Hemi that has a high amount of idle time, meaning work trucks, police cruisers, things of that nature, or if you have some type of business where you're constantly getting out of the vehicle for a few minutes, or if you're doing a lot of city driving and you're sitting at a lot of stoplights and you have that low amount of oil pressure that you get at idle. The theory is if you upgrade to a Hellcat oil pump, because it has a higher PSI at idle and a higher flow rate at idle, that'll help get some additional lubrication up to those lifters so they're not getting as oil starved if you're just using the stock pump for the engine itself. But anyway, that's the theory. Time will tell, if individuals like myself who are making this type of upgrade, if that works out in the long run. But with that being said, again, that was just an overview of the parts that have come in thus far. Oh, and you may have saw the radiator on there. Let's go take a quick look at that one, just for being completely transparent about what we're doing here. I did purchase a new radiator on this. I'll explain why. And you can see it's a CFS radiator. Kind of have to look at, now that you'd see the model number there is a 3662. That was it came up for 2009 5.7. I'm sure it'll work for a myriad of other years. Again, you'll just have to make sure you verify that. And the reason why we're changing the radiator out is I was undoing a bracket when I was taking everything apart. And when I did that, unfortunately, I had a lot of tension on it, and when the bolt finally broke free, it flew forward. Objects at rest, and then objects at rest stay at rest, and objects at motion stay in motion until they get acted upon by another force. Well, in this case, when the bracket broke free and my hand swung forward and had the bracket in my hand, it continued its momentum until the radiator broke its fall, and you can see that nice little divot there. It doesn't look like the cooling lines themselves in between the fins are damaged, but you can see they're bent pretty good, and that was my doing, 100% my doing, which is why we're replacing the radiator. But it also works out good in this case because you can kind of see the crud that has come out of this cooling system due to the other parts. So since we're putting on a new water pump, all new hoses, it was cheap enough to get a new aftermarket radiator and just go ahead and slap that in while we're doing everything else. Okay, and I think that is it. A little bit of a long-winded video, but I want to put this together because it seems to be, sometimes, like I said, it can be a little bit of a bear to track down the part number and make sure that you have the right part. And I'll put a link to the website in my description, but again, you'll notice a lot of these came from mymoparparts.com. What I like to do is go out to their website and research it and make sure I find the part I'm looking for, because their site will tell you if it's compatible with your vehicle. And then you could take their part number and then actually Google search it. And a lot of times, another site you're going to want to try, even if you're looking for an OEM part, try Rock Auto. So what I'm finding is, even if it's an OEM part, a lot of times, if you just do a part search on Rock Auto using the OEM part number, a lot of times they can get a hold of this part, and you'll find it significantly cheaper to get it from Rock Auto, even being OEM. If Rock Auto doesn't list it, then try Car ID is another one that seems to be able to get OEM parts. And if those two fail and you just have to have the OEM one, yeah, you may pay a few dollars more for it, but you can get it. And that would be mymoparparts.com. So far, they've been excellent through the ordering process. If you put an order together and also give them your VIN number at checkout, they will go through your inventory and verify based on your VIN that what you're ordering will fit the vehicle VIN number. So it's great in that aspect. Rock Auto is also good for being able to show you a myriad of aftermarket choices for a particular part if they have it, which is how we found all the Gates part numbers for all of our radiator items thus far, as well as the CFS radiator that you saw sitting on the other side of the car there. So again, it's not a, they don't sponsor this channel. This is not me trying to say, oh, you must use them. I'm just giving you my experience that Rock Auto, Car ID, mymoparparts.com. And if you saw the previous video, the lifters that we ordered that came in actually came off of eBay, but it was a nice gentleman down in Mexico that does a bulk buy on Chrysler lifters and sends them to you. And just to let you know, no, it does not come in a gallon Ziploc bag. This was just me putting them in this bag to help protect them. They will come wrapped up very securely in bubble wrap, thoroughly oiled, and then he FedExes them. As long as you're in the US, he will FedEx your order to you. I think I got mine like FedEx 2-day delivery, and that was actually part of the cost of the lifters. So it was a decent price lifter that nobody else could beat. So just to give you an idea that when you're shopping for parts, definitely shop around. If you got a part supplier you're comfortable with, like Rock Auto, and they can get it to you and get it to you but at a decent price, then by all means use it. Especially if you've got time, a little bit of time that you can play with, and you're not in a hurry to put it back together, and maybe you've got a couple of weeks of shipping time, then by all means, use it, wait out the shipping time, and save yourself a couple of bucks while you're at it. But with that being said, a little bit of a rambling video, but hopefully the part numbers will all prove useful to someone out there. And with that being said, I will cut it a video at this point. I will ask that if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you'd like to consider to do so, that would be excellent. We're over the 900 channel count, or channel member count at this point. That is terrific. I'd like to thank everybody that has subscribed thus far. If you haven't and you're finding this video series useful, please consider to do so. It just takes a couple mouse clicks, and it will help us get to that first goal of 1,000 channel subscribers. With that being said, I will cut it at this point. I will talk to you later. Thank you much. Bye.